Right now, we're getting a new look at precious prehistoric artifacts right in the middle of downtown Miami.
Archaeologists say the artifacts were unearthed during recent development and date back up to 8,000 years. Local 10's Christina Vasquez is live in downtown to show us.
Archaeologists, they are history's detectives, and right now crews of them are hard at work. They are sifting through history, uncovering artifacts that are beginning to tell the story of a civilization that lived here in Miami thousands of years ago. Nestled within Brickell's modern high-rises.
Broken pieces of pottery, arrowheads.
On the south bank of the Miami River.
There's remains of giant sea turtles, an extinct kind of seal, the West Indian monk seal.
One of the city's most significant archaeological digs is underway at what this archaeological assessment report calls the 444 Brickell Avenue parcel. Take a look. In this video shot by Local 10 digital journalist Chris Gothner, you can see crews water screening soil, finding and organizing artifacts being sorted on site.
The site that actually stretches back to 5, 6, 7,000 years ago.
You heard that right. We are talking well-preserved prehistoric artifacts, explains archaeologist William Pestle, who has visited the site.
Older than the pyramids. Older than the pyramids. It's older than, the Colosseum in Rome.
Miami has long had a knock for being too young to have a history. The reality is humans have lived in the greater Miami area for more than 10,000 years. More than 10,000 years.
Nearby the famous Miami Circle, its discovery and education about one of Florida's early peoples, the Tequesta. Here's Miami historian Dr. Paul George.
And the area around the Miami River on both banks is probably the richest area in terms of archaeological fossils and artifacts.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the property owner told Local 10 News it is their view that the findings do not require preservation on the site, but said artifacts will be preserved off-site and ultimately donated to a museum or university for further research and study. Pestle believes the city of Miami has an enormous responsibility and opportunity to safeguard what he says is a treasure trove of data.
An important story about the history and the origins of the city that we call Miami.
And get this, one thing he also said makes this particular parcel so remarkable is that because of the distinct properties of the water table here, of the bedrock here, they are actually, as they are drilling down, beginning to find organic material completely preserved. We're talking about things like wood and baskets. He says normally that just doesn't happen in South Florida. There will be a related historic and environmental preservation board meeting at the city of Miami coming up in April about this parcel. Reporting live for you, I'm Christina Vasquez, Local 10 News.
A 7,000-plus-year-old mystery has recently been unearthed in downtown Miami at 444 Brickell. The findings yielded by this anomalous site in Florida actually predate the so-called construction of Giza's pyramids by thousands of years, in the words of the experts themselves. With all eyes on the 444 Brickell excavation site, there seems to be some confusion as to what is being found and where. For example, a particular viral video going around claiming to show the new Miami site was not even filmed in Florida. Also, I've noticed that countless videos online are confusing the new Brickell site with the Miami Circle, discovered in 1998. In order to sort this all out for good, we went there ourselves. In part 1 of this expedition, we visited the Miami Circle, dated to around 2,000 years, and discussed some of the occult symbolism located in and around the circle. What most news sources and content creators have neglected to present is the fact that the quote-unquote new 444 Brickell site, dated to 7,000 plus years ago, is directly across the street from the Miami Circle. We would also not be doing the new site justice without decoding the highly unusual sculptures and monuments that are found directly between it and its sister site, the Miami Circle. After touring the downtown sites, we will head north to El Portal, Florida, to visit a Tequesta burial mound with an underground surprise that none of us saw coming. So, without further ado, we resume our journey here at the Brickell Avenue Bridge, situated directly between the Miami Circle and the new 444 Brickell site. Now enjoy.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Introducing Dr. Narco Longo.
When the developer decided that they wanted to build this multi-use building on the site, right, they first of all had to remove a pre-existing structure. And it was well known in the archaeological community that beneath that building there was likely to be some kind of archaeological material. How much, we didn't know until that building was removed. It very quickly became clear that the depth and the horizontal extent and the significance of the archaeological site there was more. To put that in context, this site is older than the pyramids in Egypt. This site is older, or as old, as some of the very first cities ever built in Mesopotamia. And yet, very little is known comparatively about these people who built this site, who lived there hundreds and thousands of years ago, precisely because there hasn't been enough systematic scientific archaeological work done at the site. One of the tensions throughout this project has been between the developer, who's been constantly pushing, right, to begin construction, and the archaeologists who have been necessarily moving slowly. And we can have the discussion about whether or not this work should have ever happened. As an archaeologist, I feel like this site should have been preserved. But given that the developer is allowed to do this legally, right, I think it is incumbent upon them, it is their responsibility as corporate citizens in Miami to make sure that while they are realizing profit, while they are building this building, they are also preserving as much of this site and as much of this information for the future as possible.
It's absolutely about money. If that was, somewhere that was not worth that much money, I think the city would honor it. But when you're talking maybe for them to buy it back at like 200 million, they're just not going to do it. But so then it comes again that you have to find the common solution or something that appeases both, because you're ignoring the history of the city. You have presidents literally across the street from it where the developer said, okay, we're going to designate this part, we're going to show our respects, and over here it's just business as usual. I guarantee you, if you were to ask people, say like the Icon 500 or anyone just around this area, like, what's happening next door? People would be like, oh, they're just building the Baccarat Hotel. It would be a very small portion of the people in Miami that knew what was going on.
The dig site is the remains of the Tequesta capital that was at the mouth of the Miami River. And the Tequesta lived along the mouth of the Miami River where it meets Biscayne Bay for thousands of years, well before they were probably even known as the Tequesta, but we do know that name was used by the people who lived there when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. There's only a couple of historical mentions of the Tequesta, so from those we know a tiny little bit about the people. So archaeology has filled in all the other gaps. And unfortunately, because Miami has been built up so much and so early in the history of Florida, we don't really have that much evidence of the Tequesta. Today, the excavation that's going on in downtown is of the capital where most Tequesta people lived, where they traded, where they had ritual and ceremony, where they met visitors from other regions. So it's really our only record of that part of Tequesta life. So the materials that are excavated, they're obliged to save, but they are not necessarily obliged to do analysis on. By law, they have to recover the materials and produce a very preliminary report of what they found, how many boxes of this, how much of that. But the kind of study that archaeologists do now, where we emphasize squeezing every last bit of data out of the pottery sherds and bones that we find, may or may not happen because it's not actually obliged. If Related wants to do the right thing and actually help the community learn about the settlement of Tequesta, they'll partner with archaeologists to do that kind of work.
My real fear here is that over the past several decades, bits and pieces of this bigger Granada site that sat at the mouth of the Miami River, or the Tequesta site, have been lost to development. A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. And at some point, there won't be anything left. We are rapidly approaching our final opportunities to systematically recover and then study materials that documented the lives of these people that lived there centuries and millennia ago.
Do you wonder what the number 444 means in the Bible? First, we need to understand that the Hebrew language is a very unique language. And oftentimes, most of the time, the names in the Hebrew have numbers that correlate with the name. And so when we understand this, we know 4 then going with number 3 simply means the creation, with 3 having to deal with the creator being the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, those 3. So number 4 is dealing with the creation. That's the number of creation, 4. 4 has to do with the 4 elements of the world: the earth, air, fire, water, the 4 regions of the earth: north, south, east, west. See, these things have to do with creation. 4, 3 plus 1. The creator, God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Creation, number 4. See, so when we're talking about 4, 4, 4, this is 4 to an extreme level. It's 4 with a strong emphasis on it. What does that mean, you say? 444 is the world number. See, we're talking about that creation. That's creation, the world. 444 is the world number. And if we look closely, we see that the number for Damascus, that world number, is 444. Remember when we talked about the language of Hebrew having numbers that correlate with names? It's 444. That is Damascus, the world number for the oldest city in the world.
So we're going to look at the number, I should say the 444th word in the New Testament Greek lexicon. And the Greek lexicon has been designed to help the user understand the original text of the Bible, right? By using Strong's version of the Bible, the user can gain a deeper knowledge of the passage being studied. And it's one of the great ways that we study. So 444 means man. Everybody just go, man. Okay, so that's what that means. And it's a generic name so that we have a distinction between God and animals, mankind. Okay, it's the world number, and that's what the number 4 represents, right? So man himself was set apart as the only creation of God's to be made in his image. I like that. You know, the prophets were set apart. So the whole thing about being set apart, hey man, you're not going to go the way that the rest of the world is going to go. You're going to go a different direction. That's called sanctification. That means set apart. So the number 444 has to do with that. Now the prophets were set apart for Jesus, which is why you see 444 stamped upon them. Wow. Okay. Do you know that there are 4,440 verses in the 5 major prophets of the Old Testament? Wow. It's interesting to note that 4,440 divided by 5 is 888, which is the numerical value of King Jesus. So in other words, whenever you introduce grace to the prophets, what you get is Jesus. Ta-da! That's just genius. I wish I'd have written that. I did. Hallelujah. 888 being the gematria or the alphabetic or alphanumeric understanding of what the name Jesus actually is. It's a big deal. Okay, so now we're going to look at some really cool 444 scriptures. So Numbers 444 is the census of the Levites, which were men who were set apart for God's purpose. Then over in Deuteronomy 444, it's all about being set apart for the law. Then in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 44, Elijah feeds the sons of the prophets, right? And then when we look over at Luke 4:4, right, it's all about being higher calling, about being set apart. And he was preaching in the synagogues of Galilee, it says. John 4:44 is the prophet set apart from his own hometown. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. Can you believe how prophetic the number 444 is? Other great 444 scriptures is Genesis 4:44. Joseph prepares to reveal his identity to his brothers. And friends, can I just tell you this, man, that Jesus himself one day will reveal himself to his brothers. So we have this all the way through the Word of God. You can see it. There's a huge study that I've done on it, but you have to also stop and look at Psalms 44, verse 4. Being set apart. You are my King and my God who decrees victories.
A total of 1,220 pottery sherds was recovered. 48 bone artifacts were found. The most common types are bone pins, gorges, and points. Most are fragmentary. They are types likely associated with fishing and hunting. Perforated shark teeth are the second most frequent bone artifact type. Human remains were uncovered from Units 4, 6, and 8. A single human tooth was found in Unit 4, Level 4. Commingled human remains came from Black Earth/Shelmidden from Unit 6, Level 7, and Unit 8, Level 2. The human remains are fragmentary and disarticulated, suggesting secondary burials. Of particular interest is the tooth of an extinct monk seal, Neomonochus tropicalis. Interestingly, modern materials were encountered even in the deepest midden deposits. These stray objects likely resulted from the activity of land crabs that peppered the parcel prior to development, with tunnels allowing modern materials to be relocated deep into the site, and conversely older materials to move to the surface. Ornaments manufactured from shell include columella pendants and circular discs, likely used as eye inserts for wooden masks.
We are seeing some of the incredible ancient artifacts being unearthed at a new site that is part of the Miami Circle in Brickell.
Archaeologists say these new discoveries prove the site is worthy of preservation. Local 10's Christina Vasquez explains.
Unquestionably meet the standards for designation as outlined in the City Code of Ordinances. It's black and white.
That is archaeologist William Pestle. He has visited this archaeological site along the south bank of the Miami River, which, take a look, has uncovered a significant number of artifacts, evidence of prehistoric life.
Older than the pyramids, it's older than Colosseum in Rome.
Pestle is one of the authors of this presentation obtained by Local 10 News, who plans to tell Miami's Historic and Environmental Preservation Board during tomorrow's meeting that 77 Southeast 5th and 444 Brickell, known as the 444 Brickell Avenue parcel site, is part of the same site as the Miami Circle, part of a Tequesta village that once extended across both banks of the Miami River.
This is a site that's recognized as regionally and nationally significant. And so if we acknowledge the significance of that, it leads us pretty necessarily to understanding that the sites that are currently being worked on merit designation and ultimately some form of protection.
Also expected to join tomorrow's meeting, Native American tribal members who have said they want the archaeological dig here to stop.
Our ancestors not dug up and be studied.
They would find no argument from this archaeologist. What if we kept a portion of this site untouched, maintaining it as a green space?
The presentation also includes ideas for creative mitigation, showing an image of fortifications of ancient Athens preserved in place and on public display as a subway installation in Greece.
This is something that is routinely done in other parts of the world. Development and cultural heritage preservation can be found to coexist.
In a statement, Related Group telling Local 10 News, we remain committed to delivering a property worthy of its unique location on the Miami River, a project that enriches the area, providing public access to the waterfront and duly honoring the site's history. And they went on to say that in their view, they believe any step toward a historic designation or preservation is, in their words, premature. You can learn more on that by reading their full statement on our website, local10.com. There you can also hear from a variety of community stakeholders on this issue. Reporting live for you, I'm Christina Vasquez, Local 10 News.
Now to designate an archaeological site in Brickell as historic after a significant amount of sacred artifacts were recently unearthed.
Archaeologists say it's part of the famed Miami Circle that developers want to build on. Local 10's Christian De La Rosa is live in Coconut Grove, where all sides made their cases. Christian.
It is a decision of historical proportions, and so the board tonight voted in favor to designate one site at 444 Brickell as having historical proportion, historical value for preservation. And we should mention this site, there is no archaeological dig. They did, however, vote to withdraw that same proposal for another site that does have an archaeological excavation underway.
My people continue to fight every day against the systemic attempts of erasure.
A battle over land, how to preserve ancient history found beneath the grounds of Brickell.
They knew what was there.
Indigenous communities who want the prehistoric artifacts and human remains found here untouched. Archaeologists who want to study it, and the landowners who want to build on it, but claim they are also committed to preserving and honoring the site.
Everything on the Miami River has artifacts.
Related Development Group CEO and Chairman George Perez and his team fighting against the proposal to designate the site at 77 Southeast 5th Street for historical preservation. Archaeologists say it would give them more time to study the site.
Miami has a deep history that's not fully appreciated. It has an indigenous history that goes back thousands of years.
Developers say it would be a costly delay for their plans to eventually build. Tuesday night, the city's preservation board voting to withdraw the proposal to designate, allowing the excavation to be completed and requiring the developer to come back with a plan to manage the site.
Because I think that represents a real missed opportunity to make sure that the sorts of commitments that George Perez talked about, right, of the world-class treatment that he would give to these artifacts, that would happen in a way that could be legally enforceable.
Anything that questions our commitment to this great city is hurtful.
Sources tell us it could take several months for the current archaeological excavation that's underway to be wrapped up, at which point they will start working on the action plan, come back here, and the board could still vote to designate that site for preservation. We'll let you know how it goes. Live in Miami, I'm Christian De La Rosa, Local 10 News.
As important as the 444 site is, it is only the latest of sites found in downtown since the Miami Circle.
Yate! 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 Aho! Aho! Again, yate! 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 Aho! Aho! We're calling on the Great Spirit, the ancestors, and we calling them and giving them thanks.
Certainly the Miami Circle is truly an unprecedented chapter in the historic preservation of Florida. Since the discovery of the Circle in 1998, the Florida Department of State has been committed to the preservation and the interpretation of this site, and actually to making this park a reality. Thanks to the efforts of so many, the Miami Circle Park is ready to educate, inspire, and encourage future generations to appreciate the significance of this special place, and also to tell the story of the times and the people of our ancient past.
In 1998, as a city commissioner, I was very proud to stand along history in the battle between development and the past and history. And history won, and it showed that history can coexist with progress.
The Miami River now has a new park. The Tequesta now have a voice, and Miamians now have a sense of place that connects us to our ancient past. Because of these efforts and sacrifices, the mosaic of Miami's culture is now complete, and we are wiser and more humane. Thank you.
A huge find in downtown Miami this week. Archaeologists uncovered an ancient Native American village that could date back 2,000 years. It's being called one of the most significant prehistoric sites in the U.S. The Miami Herald reports over the past several months, archaeologists have dug up 8 large circles made up of uniformly carved holes in the limestone. Historians believe these could be foundation holes for Tequesta Indian dwellings. Tequesta Indians occupied an area along the southeastern coast of Florida near the Miami River, but many of their villages were found deserted by the late 18th century. The site falls inside a designated archaeological zone and was originally being cleared for an entertainment complex last year. Chairman of Miami's Historic and Environmental Preservation Board, William Hopper, told NPR News preservation officials have called for a redesign of the project to save as much of the site as possible.
It wasn't really until probably September that we began to have an idea of the significance of the find there. But we want to see what we can do to preserve as much of that as we can so that people in future generations can have an understanding of what happened there at the mouth of the river.
In the previous video, we analyzed the Tequesta Archer sitting atop the Brickell Avenue Bridge, pictured here, situated between the Miami Circle and the new 444 Brickell site. Let us now discuss the artist responsible for this installation and his other contributions to the area. Quote, Miguel Carbonell was selected in a competition in 1992 which was to create the largest landmark monument in bronze in the state of Florida, the artwork for Miami's Brickell Avenue Bridge, linking downtown Miami to the financial district of Brickell. This was the first time that the Florida Department of Transportation incorporated architecture, art, and engineering in a bridge design. Carbonell created the 53-foot bronze public monument, the Pillar of History and the Tequesta family, located mid-span on the bridge. The bronze bas-relief column, 36 feet in height, illustrates a carved graphical narration of the lives of the Tequesta Indians, Miami's first inhabitants, featuring 150 figures. At the top stands a 17-foot bronze sculpture, Tequesta family, portraying a Tequesta Indian warrior aiming an arrow to the sky, searching for his place in eternity, as the wife stares into space in search for a better life, and the child, aware of their imminent extinction, covers his face with his hands as he cannot face his future. End quote. Believe it or not, Manuel Carbonell had the following to say about his work in Brickell. Quote, Little miracles, certainly an invaluable opportunity. I was in love with the project, first because the Tequestas are a fascinating people. Secondly, because it was an important monument with such tremendous dimensions. I am convinced that, previously, long ago, there were many civilizations more advanced than ours, who knew how to enjoy the beauty of the soul. While I was in Pietrasanta, Italy, to commence this 2-year project, having finished all the bas-reliefs and having completed 3/5 of the pillar, I suffered a stroke. My left side was paralyzed, and being left-handed, I was desperate. I kept asking the medical staff, "Listen, when can I once again begin to move my arm? I am a sculptor." The reply, "Be patient," which I am not. On the other hand, I would tell myself, "Look, Carbonell, you are no longer a sculptor. You have been a sculptor for more than 70 years, but you are no longer a sculptor now. Your left hand is paralyzed. Nobody can change that." It's absurd, but on the other hand, since I couldn't accept that, I would say, yes, I can. I can change that. The doctors released me from the hospital so I could emotionally feel better and come back in a couple of months to start my physical therapy. 10 days later, I told my assistants to bring the unfinished portion and get me my tools, and bring them to the house because I wanted to start carving again. Shortly thereafter, my therapy nurse that came to my house spread the news I was astonishing. All my friends from the hospital arrived. They couldn't believe that I was already working. Okay, maybe not with my left hand, but I was surely working with my right hand. My life is my work, and my work is my life. End quote. Carbonell had previously worked on some other interesting, high-profile projects. Quote, in 1976, Carbonell created the bicentennial eagle, which he gifted to the United States of America during a ceremony on the west lawn of the White House in honor of the nation's bicentennial anniversary. During the bicentennial celebrations, the sculpture was on display in the Great Hall of Commerce in Washington, D.C. End quote. 12 bronze bas-reliefs of Florida fauna are located at the base of the flagpoles on the walkways of both sides of the bridge. End quote. These 12 plaques, a type of Florida zodiac, could represent the 12 signs of the zodiac depicted in the Miami Circle star map. As shown in Part 1 of this expedition, and of course, when we examine the number 12, we find 4 plus 4 plus 4. Carbonell also created 4 additional bas-reliefs for the support piers, measuring 4 feet by 8 feet, or rather, 4 feet by 4 feet plus 4 feet. Keeping with our theme of 444, depicted are Henry Flagler, Standard Oil co-founder, partner of John D. Rockefeller, and the father of Miami; William Dorsey, who is most celebrated in Miami for being one of America's first cross-dressers; William and Mary Brickell, for whom the neighborhood is named; Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, for whom the infamous high school is named; and Julia Tuttle, the so-called Mother of Miami.
Miami is the only major U.S. city founded by a woman. This is the story of Julia Tuttle. Julia was the OG real estate developer of Miami. She came down from Ohio to Miami in the 1890s and bought a huge tract of land. She recognized the potential and the incredible geography here. She felt like this is a place people from the north would love to come to. But in that time, when railroad was the main form of transportation, there was no way to get down to Miami for those northerners. So she worked on a way to convince Henry Flagler to bring his railroad station down to Miami. He wasn't into the idea at first until, as the legend says, the Great Freeze, when all of the crops in the southern United States were frozen over. Henry Flagler loved oranges. She sent a crate of oranges from sunny South Florida up to Henry Flagler to show him just how valuable and beautiful this land that was still warm and ripe is. He was amazed by the oranges. So was constructed the railroad and the beautiful city of Miami.
Carbonell would go on to sculpt 2 more major projects in the Brickell area. This public monumental landmark sculpture is located at Tequesta Point on Brickell Key, at the entrance of the Miami River. This sculpture can be experienced on the island and from downtown, as well as the open waters of Biscayne Bay. Carbonell was commissioned in 1998 by the Swire Art Trust to create a 21-foot bronze sculpture, El Centinela del Rio. This iconic landmark is depicting a Tequesta Indian blowing into a bronze and alabaster conch shell. This monument is perched upon a 6-foot pedestal covered in coral rock. The statue is muscular and of an immensely powerful Tequesta Indian that is serving as a welcoming figure to the magic city of Miami, and a luminous beacon of light at night. To highlight the symbolic nature of the conch shell, you grasp anticipation, passion, celebration, sheer joy, unending joy, in sounding the spiral instrument again and again. This monument serves as a civil talisman, end quote. Swire Properties commissioned this wondrous fountain, and it is a composition of 3 Indian children playing with 2 manatees, a mother with her calf. Manatees are also known as the sea cow, and have a special relation in the area, as one of the 2 subspecies is the Florida manatee, end quote. Now, when I think of the word manatee, the word humanity always comes to mind. Quote, their behavior is that of a gentle and slow-moving animal. Most of the time is spent eating, resting, and traveling, so it is a delight to experience them engaged with these children having a tender encounter, enjoying the shared water. This public landmark is in a serene setting overlooking the waterfront at the walkway between 2 and 3 Tequesta Point condominiums, creating a special oasis of a water feature on Brickell Key, Miami, Florida, complementing further to Carbonell's contribution to Miami's first inhabitants. All of the following Carbonell sculptures are either in Florida or spent considerable time in Florida. This is yet another allusion to Florida being the Garden of Eden. Just north of these sites in Bayfront Park stand a slew of eerie statues and monuments. The first of these, named the Giant Head, is reminiscent of the icon Brickell's Maui pillars, which, despite their proximity, have nothing to do with each other. Officially. Next up, we have Flora, la recogedora de sueños. Flora, whose pagan rites inspired the holiday Easter, is the patron goddess of flowers, springtime, and Florida. This is not the only time she has been formally depicted in the artwork of Florida.
At the back of the secret garden is the burial site of John Ringling, Mabel Burton Ringling, and John's sister Ida North. At the site is a marble sculpture of Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers and spring.
When we dissect the word Florida a bit further, we actually find the names of two Greco-Roman goddesses, Flora and Ida. Flora is a Greco-Roman goddess of flowers, springtime, and fertility. She is said to have once been a human prostitute, but was elevated to the status of goddess. That sure sounds like Florida to me. Locations in the Mediterranean, such as Florence, Florina, and Floria, owe their name to this goddess and her phonetic root. So why not Florida? The Greek city of Florina actually bears the motto, "Where Greece begins," and I think they might be on to something. Flora, and her Greek equivalent, Chloris, is a peripheral character in the Garden of Hesperides myth. As shown in my other videos, Florida is indeed the Garden of Hesperides, and thus its Christian equivalent, the Garden of Eden in Paradise. Just as the word paradise comes from the Greek Hesperides, Eden may very well come from the Greek goddess Ida, as may Italy for that matter.